The sound of metal hitting the iron rail was loud. Kang! And the sound made every head on Whitehall turn. As Juno, a 17-hand horse with coiled muscle and black and white rage, jerked beneath me, my heart raced. For a moment, all the centuries of British pageantry, with its serious faces and eager camera flashes, seemed to turn into chaos. "Step back right now," I yelled, and my voice cut through the shocked tourists. One gloved hand pulled hard on the reins. Juno shook her big head, sending drops of sweat and spit flying through the pale morning air. The loud, fast beat of her hooves on the stone drowned out the crowd's uncertain mumbling. My boot pushed hard against her side to keep her steady, but she was all nerves and flared nostrils. A woman screamed from somewhere behind the wall of phones. I barely noticed it because my eyes were fixed on the man stepping over the chain barrier. His bright yellow jacket clashed with the blood-red bricks. A heavy wrench shone in the weak London sun in his right hand. Every part of my body screamed for help. Juno felt it as well. Her ears flicked back and her whole body shook as the strange man walked up to her slowly and carefully, as if he had walked these stones 100 times before. Mason Doyle was the man's name. I had never seen him up close before, but every guard in Westminster had heard rumors about him. He had been fired from a dozen jobs and was always on the verge of getting into trouble. He had a reputation for getting angry like a storm over the Thames. He was more than just a rumor today. He was trouble with a plan and a face. He walked right into our no-go zone, with the chain scraping against his boots and the wrench swinging at his side. Someone tried to grab his arm, but he shook them off and stared at me. I could feel the vibration rise up through my boots, through the saddle, and into my chest as Juno snorted and her breath steamed. I let go of my left hand, and my fingers brushed the hilt of my ceremonial sword. I had learned how to deal with rioters, protesters, and drunk stag parties. But not for this, whatever it was. Possible agitator. Keep sharp. Trust your horse. The warnings from the morning brief came back to me. Kang. He hit the rail with the wrench again, right next to Juno's fetlock. She kicked the air with her iron-shod hooves and reared back. I pulled hard and held on, trying to calm her down. "Calm down, girl, calm down!" The crowd pushed back in a wave, making a lot of noise and people tripping over each other. A little boy dropped his Union Jack flag, and it fluttered under Juno's hooves, just a few inches away from being trampled. My own breath was rough inside my helmet. Doyle, the man, raised the wrench again, but his eyes darted to something in his pocket, where he was thinking and waiting. The rhythm of the snare drum in the parade went through the city. It was now in time with the pulse in my ears. Faster, faster, faster. In a split second, I saw the movement. His left hand darting down, the flash of colored tape, and a bundle in his palm. My mind screamed, not a gun, not a knife, but a woman's voice, low and steady, came through the wind, but it was only in my mind. They don't teach horses to be scared. They show them what to do when they are scared. The sound of spanners and hooves hitting the ground filled the air all of a sudden. I saw the arc when Doyle threw the strange bundle at Juno's front legs. From Fraser's point of view, there was a crack that wasn't very loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the morning. It sounded like a string of mini firecrackers going off under Juno's chest. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and burnt powder. Juno screamed and reared up, lifting me into the air with all her strength. Tourists screamed and fell over each other. Some ran to the street while others stood still, their phones still in their hands. "Stop, Juno! Turn, girl, turn!" My hands worked the reins in a frantic way, and years of training came back to me through muscle memory. I leaned forward and felt her twist beneath me. The world tilted as she spun, her flanks brushing against the fence. I saw an old woman with gray hair falling out of her beret out of the corner of my eye. She was only a few inches away from Juno's hooves. There's no time to think. I threw my right leg over, and my boots hit the ground before I even knew what I was doing. The wrench fell to the ground next to me. Doyle's eyes were wide and darting. He didn't expect a lifeguard to leave his mount. His face changed, and then he lunged. I grabbed his wrist in the middle of his swing. We crashed into the iron barrier, our breath mixing, and his wrench arm got stuck between us. He fought with a lot of strength, more than a street drunk should have. My training kicked in, and I saw Krav Maga patterns flashing through my mind. One sharp turn and a pivot made him scream, and the wrench fell out. Everyone in the crowd gasped. I heard Juno scream, but I couldn't look back. Doyle hit me in the gut with his shoulder, almost breaking free. We fell over, my helmet slipping to the side and my boots scraping on the stone. Juno's huge hooves clattered dangerously close above. The world shrank down to pain and heat, and Doyle's snarl in my ear. Then a blast of cold air. He pulled away, pushed me hard, and disappeared into the crowd. I got up quickly, ignoring the pain that was growing in my side, and looked for the high-vis jacket. There, a flash of yellow, ducking behind a coach and tourists moving out of the way in confusion. "Police!" I yelled, trying to find my radio. "Suspect running away!" "Lifeguards in danger. Repeat. The suspect is running north." Juno swung her huge head around, her eyes wild and her body shivering. I ran to her side and stroked her neck to calm her down. Her sides heaved, and her muscles were slick with sweat, but she stayed still when I touched her. A police officer came up, out of breath. "Where did he go?" I pointed, my breath coming in short bursts. "White coach, he's in the crowd. Be careful. He has tools, maybe even bombs." The sirens rose, a loud, discordant wail over the fading chaos. Juno shivered, but stayed still next to me, as if to say, "I'm with you. We'll deal with whatever happens next together." But Mason Doyle was already slipping away in the shadows of Whitehall, leaving behind only confusion, smoke, and the sound of iron hitting iron. It felt like London was holding its breath as the moment slowed down. The little firecrackers made smoke that curled up in sickly wisps and floated around Juno's hooves. My mind kept going back to the chaos. Doyle's face, the wrench, the scream that lasted only a second, and the sound of iron shoes hitting stone. Juno was shaking under me. Her eyes rolled back, showing white, and her muscles tensed up for another bolt. The chain-link fence behind me rattled as tourists pushed back, their faces twisted in fear. A police whistle shrieked somewhere, but it was sharp and useless against the panic. Doyle then made his move. He wasn't running. He was watching and waiting, with something in his hand. He looked down and threw a second object, wrapped in duct tape, low and fast. It rolled across the cobblestones and hit Juno's legs. My body moved on its own. I didn't even think about it. "Juno, turn! Step aside!" The words tore out of my throat. My boot dug in, and my hands worked the reins. She moved, her strong shoulders twisting, and her huge body blocked the way between the crowd and the rolling device. There was a soft pop, and another string of firecrackers went off under Juno's front legs. The smoke was sharper now, and the bitter chemical smell made my nose hurt. Juno danced in place and almost hit the iron fence. I saw the old woman again. She had fallen, her purse had spilled, and she was shaking on the ground. I had seconds, maybe even less. The ceremonial sword I had with me was no good for this. I let go of the reins with one hand and reached for the woman. "Hold on tight, ma'am," I said. my voice shaking a little. Juno got ready by lowering her head, as if she knew what was going to happen. I used her as a living shield while I dragged the woman out of the way. My body pressed against her side. Someone yelled, and it was loud and high-pitched. Doyle took advantage of the chance, his sneakers pounding the rock. In the chaos, I barely noticed him jumping over the chain, pushing through a group of tourists, and heading straight for the bus lane. Juno stamped her feet and shook her head, and the metal bit hit her teeth, but I stood between her and the worst of the chaos. 2 police officers tried to stop Doyle, but he ducked behind a bus that was parked on the curb. He disappeared into the blind spot between the bus and a white delivery van. I saw a flash of orange, the back of his high-vis vest, as he pushed his way onto the tourist bus and blended in with the crowd. My radio came on with a lot of noise and voices. "We have a code Royal Horse. Repeat, a possible explosive threat at Horse Guards Parade. Units respond." I pushed the button to call. "Suspect is Doyle, Mason Doyle, a white man in his 30s wearing a high-visibility vest. He escaped northbound and was last seen getting on a white tourist bus. He may have a weapon. Don't approach him without backup." People in the crowd were still pushing and shoving, scared and restless. Juno's sides were moving up and down, and her chest was sweaty. Someone in the crowd started yelling about a bomb. A mother held her daughter close and cried, looking to me as if I had all the answers. No, I didn't. My hands shook as I stroked Juno's neck. She flinched, then leaned into my hand, and her breathing got slower and deeper. The sound of her snorting, breathing, and hooves scraping kept me grounded and my mind clear. I heard her voice then, as if it were coming from behind the chaos. It was soft, calm, and the voice of the stable hand. "Keep in mind that they taught Juno how to handle the unexpected. She has been through cannons, drums, and crowds, but her strength isn't what makes her special. It's her faith." I shut my eyes for a moment and let that trust come back to me. "Good girl, Juno," I whispered, so she could hear me. "We're not done. Not today." The world started moving again. The old woman I had helped up looked at me with a blank stare. "Thank you." I wasn't ready for that. I nodded and looked her over for injuries while scanning the crowd for more trouble. My radio was already buzzing with orders. "Fraser, do you understand? What is the status of the mount?" I pushed the button. Juno is shaken, but still standing. One person was hurt, but not seriously. The suspect got away on foot and might have gotten on a tourist bus. Again, the suspect Doyle might be on the move. "Lockdown on the way to Westminster," they said. A siren sounded nearby, sending pigeons flying in all directions. I helped the old lady get up and gave her back her purse. She held my wrist tightly and looked at me with wide eyes. You're more than just a nice uniform, aren't you?" I tried to grin. "We do our best, ma'am. We really do." Later that day, switched to the stable hand. The horses are aware. You can hear it in the way their hooves hit the ground, which is restless and unsure. In the Hyde Park barracks, word travels faster than sound from stall to stall, through the soft touch of noses and the creak of old leather. Before Fraser brought Juno in, I heard about how close she came to death. They were both jumpy and quiet. Not just her size or color made Major Juno the right choice. The Queen herself picked her out of all the people we've trained. She's the best we've ever trained. There is a small silver plaque in her stall that has her name and the date she got there. I remember that day. She stomped her big feet, shook her head, and let everyone know she was there. People think drum horses are just for parades, with their shiny feathers and polished harnesses. But when you're out there facing a real threat, you find out who has heart. Most of the time, Juno's is bigger. Back to Fraser. I checked Juno for injuries while the police blocked off the entrance to keep the area safe and calm the crowd. There was no blood, just a little swelling above the fetlock and a faint mark where one of the firecrackers went off too close. I ran my hand down her leg and whispered words of comfort, even though the adrenaline was still coursing through my veins. A police officer came over. "Are you okay, Sergeant Fraser?" "I'll live," I said. "But I'm worried about what will happen next time. He's not done yet." He nodded with a frown. "We'll make security tighter. Sergeant, go get some sleep." As I led Juno back through the crowd, the sound of her shoes echoed like a heartbeat. Every step reminded me that today could have been a lot worse. Trooping the color is tomorrow. The stakes would only get higher. I looked back once as we went through the iron gates. For a moment, I thought I saw Doyle's face in the crowd. It was a flash of defiance and a challenge thrown across the square. We still had work to do, not even close. Hyde Park Barracks felt like a different world from Whitehall that night. Outside, the air was sharp and damp, and the fog made the city lights look blurry. Inside the stables, though, the air was thick with sweat, hay, and something else, an anxious energy that clung to every beam. Juno was in her stall, her ears twitching and her muscles still tight under her shiny coat. I took off my helmet and ran my hand along her neck. I could feel the tremor that was still in her body. As she moved her weight from side to side, the iron shoes tapped lightly on the rubber mat. Her tail flicked back and forth in a quiet way. "Easy, girl," I said softly as I reached for the soft, bristled brush I always kept close by. The first strokes were unsure. The bristles whispered over her coat, getting rid of the dirt and stress of the day, one careful stroke at a time. Juno let out a long, deep, shaky breath and put her head on my shoulder. For a moment, the world was just her warmth, the low creak of wood, and the steady beat of my hand. I thought about the day ahead, when we would have Trooping the Color, the biggest event of the year. Everyone in the country would be watching us, and now that Doyle was still on the loose, every parade was a question mark, and every routine was full of what-ifs. I let myself get lost in the old routine. A curry comb, a soft brush, and a last look at her hooves. Every time the metal pick hit the iron shoes, it made a sharp sound that was somehow comforting, like a song you know in a world that has become unpredictable. She stomped once, twice, and the sound echoed down the row of stalls. Another horse whickered back. Change to the stable hand, who is calm and thoughtful. At some point every night, the barracks quiet down and the noise of the city fades away. All you can hear is the slow breathing of the horses. That's when I check the locks, sweep the straw, and listen for the little stories that only the stables can tell. The name of Major Juno is on a silver plate. I still remember the morning she got there. Her hooves drummed against the trailer floor, and her mane was all tangled up from the long ride down from Melton Mowbray. She was all legs and nerves back then, but as soon as she stepped onto London soil, you could see the spark in her eyes. Not just any horse. She acted like she was from the past. People think these horses are just for show at parades and pictures. They don't know how a drum horse is made, the waiting, the hours in the ring, teaching them not to flinch when they hear gunfire or fireworks, how you get them to stand still while drums pound inches from their sides, or when a kid slips under the fence to get a better look. The Queen herself, Camilla, chose Juno's name. She said she wanted a horse that was strong and gentle, traditional and trustworthy. I guess that's what Juno is. A link between the past and the present, between bravery and peace. Back to Fraser. I leaned against the stall and felt the pain in my legs and the bruises growing on my ribs, the metallic screech of Doyle's wrench, the pop and sizzle of firecrackers, and Juno's scream as she rose above the crowd kept playing in my head. I was curious about how much she remembered, and how much of her fear was just muscle, and how much was something deeper. The city was winding down outside. The sirens faded away into the night, leaving only the distant sound of traffic. The other horses were settling in, and I could hear their soft, slow breaths, which were broken up by the sound of chains or straw rustling. Someone down the row hummed a lullaby, a slow, steady song from the days of the cavalry. Juno's eyes closed, and her breathing got steadier. I watched her flank rise and fall, and the slow rhythm of trust came back. I thought about what might happen tomorrow. Doyle was out there somewhere, planning his next move. I knew he wasn't done, just like I knew my own heartbeat. Not with us. Not with Juno. I looked at her legs one last time, running my fingers over them to see if there was any swelling or heat. Not too bad. A small bruise that is already fading. I put my palm on her shoulder and felt the warmth go through my bones. I said softly, "Rest, girl. Tomorrow is a big day." The soft clang of a hoof against metal, the quiet snort of a sleeping horse, and the soft jangle of a halter were the sounds that calmed me down more than any words could. The city would expect ceremony and perfection the next day. But tonight, all I had to do was breathe. Change to the stable hand. On nights like these, I always stay at Juno's stall a little longer. She's more than just a mount. She is a memory that is still alive, a story that is still being told. I clean her bridle, lay out the new straw, and run my hands down her strong legs. She doesn't flinch anymore, even when the drums start playing outside the barracks. It took months, no, years, of careful, patient work. I tell the new recruits, who are all from the country, that being a leader is a two-way street. You teach the horse, but she also teaches you things like how to be patient, how to trust, and how to listen even when you're scared. Even when the world outside seems like it's about to fall apart. That's why we do this. Routine and little rituals that connect us to the past can be comforting. I check Juno's nameplate one last time and feel the cold weight of the silver under my thumb. Tomorrow will come, and so will whatever storms the city sends our way. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of the barracks, with the horses breathing slowly and deeply around me, I get the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we're ready. Back to Fraser, closing. I put my uniform on the hook, and my boots thudded softly on the floor. The city's heart kept beating steadily and strongly outside. For a brief moment, I let myself think that everything would be okay. That tomorrow, no matter what was waiting for us on the other side of dawn, Juno and I would face it together. The first blue-gray streaks of dawn crept across the barracks yard, giving everything that strange, holy stillness that only London could create before a parade. I stood at the open stable door with one hand on the bridle and my eyes on the horizon, where the city was starting to wake up. Juno stood next to me, already saddled and shining. Her mane was combed, and her feathers were brushed until they were whiter than the clouds that were gathering low over the rooftops. The city was quiet for now. As the lifeguards got together in twos and threes to check their tack and straighten their red tunics, I could hear the soft whinnying of horses and the rhythmic thump of hooves on packed dirt. A few tourists were already waiting outside the gates, cameras hanging around their necks and their voices low with excitement and something like respect. I took in the cool morning air It was sharp and sweet, with a hint of rain and the smell of horses, leather, and old brass. Juno moved her ears, and her breath made a cloud in front of her. I patted her on the back to reassure her and checked the strap under her chin. It felt good to have a routine and know that things were in order. Every morning of the parade, this was my favorite time. The city was ready, the guards were ready, and there was a feeling that, for a short time at least, everything would go as it always had, with each movement practiced and exact, passed down through generations. There was a soft click of a camera shutter coming from behind the fence. I turned around and saw a little girl smiling. She was too young to reach the top rail. She waved at Juno with big eyes. The horse's head went down, and I could have sworn she winked back. Change to the stable hand, who is warm and steady. You can always tell when it's time for a parade. The youngest foals even stand a little straighter, as if they know something big is about to happen. The old clock in the barracks ticks a little faster. There is a hum of excitement that is sharp, sweet, and full of memories. I walk the line, looking at each stall, checking the clasps on the harnesses again, and listening to the quiet talks between men and their horses. All of the brass is shiny. Each plume is perfectly fluffed over each helmet. I've seen these mornings for 10 years, and they still have the same magic. Juno is always the best. She is bigger than most, but what really stands out about her is how she moves, slowly, calmly, and without being bothered by the noise around her. She doesn't even shake her head when Sergeant Fraser checks her girth and makes changes to her bit. It takes more than a day or even a year to build trust like that. It's made through early mornings, late nights, 1,000 whispered promises, and soft hands. Back to Fraser, changing tone as the city wakes up. The light changed, becoming brighter and more golden, and it warmed the bricks as we walked out into the main yard. The sound of hooves hitting stone, the creak of saddle leather, and the hush of anticipation all came together to make a symphony I had heard before. But this morning, my mind was racing. I couldn't stop thinking about Doyle's eyes from the day before. They were angry and full of cunning behind his fake confusion. Captain Hargrove walked down the line as we waited for the final inspection. His eyes were as sharp as a knife. He said quietly as he got to me, "We've had a disturbance," his words low enough that they didn't carry. "Westminster police think the troublemaker may still be in the area. Stay alert. Have faith in your horse. Have faith in your training." "Yes, sir," I said, and my mouth suddenly felt dry. Juno's ear moved toward me, as if she understood what was going on. The city outside the gates was waking up quickly now. As the sun burned through the last of the fog, tourists got closer and laughter broke out. People took pictures of the pass gate, with shiny swords, shiny boots, diversified horses, and reins that were tight and neat. A trumpet played softly, slowly, and simply, and the sound drifted over the yard. It was a tradition, a sign that the parade was about to start. But today the notes seemed to linger in the air a little longer, as if they could feel the tension in every step. I looked to my left and saw Constable Mills, who was standing at the edge of the crowd. He nodded at me, then leaned in closer and spoke softly. "Still no sign of Doyle, Sergeant, but we're keeping an eye on it." I tightened my grip on the reins. "We'll be ready if he tries anything." He was able to smile a little. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." Change to the memory, stable hand, and foreshadowing. In the mornings, the people who work in the barracks tell an old story. How another drum horse almost panicked when she heard the starter's pistol years ago. But the rider's calm voice and the crowd's sudden silence brought her back. I sometimes think that the city remembers these times, keeping them somewhere between the stones and the morning light. As the parade gets ready, I polish Juno's nameplate by running my thumb over the letters that are carved into it. The men and she are both ready. But underneath all the routine there is a tension, a quiet sense that anything could happen today. Back to Fraser, the excitement growing. After the last checks were done, I took Juno to her spot at the front of the line. The band got together close by, and the light caught every move as the trumpets and snare drums shone. The silence was almost holy, like the last moment before the city's noise came back. I took a slow breath and listened to Juno's heartbeat under my hand. The city's heart echoed with it. She was calm now, her tail swishing and her nostrils flaring as she smelled the wind. The trumpeter raised his horn again. This time the music was softer, like the slow start of a parade that hadn't started yet. It was the sound of peace, or maybe just the idea of it. The city was quiet, the soldiers were ready, and we were all waiting for the next note, step, or hour. But I thought I saw a flash of orange in the crowd far away, under the music. It could have been a hint, a memory, or nothing at all. I shook my head, fixed my uniform, and got into the rhythm, trusting Juno and the team. For now, London was calm, and the parade went on as it always had, with every hoofbeat in time with the city's steady, ancient pulse. But storms are always brewing, even if you can't see them. The city was buzzing by late afternoon. Flags were snapping over the mall, and crowds were spilling past the barricades, laughing and talking in waves. The smell of warm stone, sun on horsehair, and the sweet smell of ice cream carts in the distance filled the air. This was a day of show for the public. It was a mission for us, one step, one breath, and one look at a time. Juno and I led the lifeguards down the mall, and her shoes made a clear sound on the red pavement. There was pride in the way she moved. Her neck was arched and her ears flicked at every sound. The parade behind us looked like a river of red and gold, with sabers flashing, pennants flying, and the steady beat of tradition making its way to Buckingham Palace. I kept looking around. I noticed every group of people, every van parked, and every glint of metal. It had been a sharp briefing that morning. Doyle was still somewhere in the city, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle over me like a second uniform. As we went around the bend near the Victoria Memorial, a group of city workers in orange vests was standing next to an open manhole. Nothing out of the ordinary. Maintenance crews always worked the route on parade days. But the way they huddled together with their backs to me and tools at their feet made me nervous. For a moment, Juno's walk stuttered. I saw it, the twitch of her ear and the tightness in her jaw. "Steady," I whispered, squeezing my knees just right, which was the signal we had practiced 1,000 times. But she raised her head, flared her nostrils, and breathed loudly in my ears. She could smell something, and it wasn't good. The sound changed. The steady beat of hooves, the distant band, and the sound of camera shutters all seemed to fade away. The sharp smell of solvent and the faint sound of metal on metal took its place. I looked ahead at the road, trying to figure out what she felt before I did. A split second later, I looked down at the tarmac. There was a narrow silver strip there, half hidden by the curb. It wasn't a city problem or a drainage grate. It was something twisted and sharp that shone in the sun. My heart raced and thudded. My radio made a crackling sound, then a warning from behind. "Do you copy, Fraser? At checkpoint 3, something is wrong. I repeat, there may be an obstruction." Juno snorted and stepped to the side before I could answer, almost running into the next horse. The smell was stronger now, like a chemical that made my eyes water. I saw it right away. A homemade spike strip, like the kind you'd see in a police chase, with steel teeth ready to eat hooves. I didn't think. I just did it. "Juno, move to the side now," she answered right away, swinging her huge body wide. My boot hit the curb, which hurt my ankle, but it didn't matter. Her hooves safely clattered past the spike, but the next horse in line, a young bay named Samson, wasn't so lucky. A loud, sickening clang rang out as Samson's right foreleg hit the spikes. His rider screamed as the horse stumbled. The metal bit into flesh, and blood sprayed all over the red pavement. In a flash, order fell apart. People screamed and gasped as tourists rushed back, trampling barriers. The parade behind me got stuck, with horses rearing, soldiers yelling, and the band coming to a discordant stop. "Medic!" I yelled, my voice breaking through the noise. "Samson's down! Block off the mall! Again, block the mall!" In the middle of the surge, I saw Orange, a city worker with a wrench in one hand and grease on his face. We looked each other in the eye. Doyle was the one. He smiled, his lips peeling back, and let go of the wrench, which made a loud noise that echoed up the mall. He slipped between two coaches and disappeared as quickly as he had come. I wanted to chase him down, leave everything behind, and hunt him down, but duty kept me at Juno's side and the parade's carnage. I turned her around and pushed her back into the chaos, hoping to use her size as a shield. People were everywhere, screaming, running, and some were filming on their phones as the medics ran forward with their kit bags swinging. Blood ran down Samson's leg, and the young horse was shaking. His rider was pale and sweating as he tried to control his horse. I slid off Juno's back and helped move the hurt horse out of the way without thinking. Juno's calm presence kept us grounded. Even when we were scared, she stood her ground, snorted, and stomped, but she didn't run away. The police came with flashing blue lights and loud radios. I told them what I had seen, my voice tight and my heart racing. It was Doyle, who was pretending to be a city worker. He put down a spike strip. "Sabotage the route." A detective swore under his breath. "He's getting worse." There was a lot of chaos behind us in the parade. Horses running around, tourists pushing against barriers, and the band trying to bring order back. But in the middle of it all, Juno stood tall like the eye of a storm and stared at me. Change to the stable hand, memory cutting through fear. My heart almost stopped when I heard the code on the radio. "Horse down on the mall." This is every stable hand's worst nightmare. You remember the drills and the stories of parades that went wrong and everyone watched. But you also remember how drum horses are taught to keep their heads, and how a good rider and a good mount become one heartbeat. Juno is the best we've ever had. I knew she had pulled Fraser clear before the report came in. That's how horses are. They know when danger is coming. They never falter because they carry the weight of the regiment and tradition on their backs. Back to Fraser. While the medics worked, I looked around at the people, my breath hot, and my hand shaking as I stroked Juno's mane. Doyle was out there watching, waiting for his next chance. I had to make sure he never got it. The parade would go on, even though it was hurt. That was always the case. Juno taught me that there is strength beneath the polish and pageantry, and that calm in the eye of the storm. But I knew deep down that today's attack was just the start. There is a split second after a disaster when the world stops. Every muscle is tense, and every sound is clear. Then everything goes crazy. That's how it felt when Samson's cries stopped and the sound of sirens filled the mall, breaking the silence like a warning bell for all of London. I looked at Juno, who was still calm in the middle of the chaos. Her big chest was rising and falling, and her eyes were wide but not crazy. She was waiting for me to give her the go-ahead. I got on the horse, barely scraping my boots on the stirrups, and pushed my knees in. "Come on, girl. He's not getting away this time." Juno rushed forward, her hooves pounding the red pavement with each step as a promise. The edges of the city were blurry. Doyle was the only one who mattered now. His orange vest was already disappearing behind a wall of double-decker buses that were weaving through a crowd of tourists. My radio made a loud noise. "Fraser, code Royal Horse, suspect mobile going north. All units meet at Admiralty Arch." "Copy," I yelled back, but my voice got lost in the rush. Juno and I sped ahead, weaving through a bunch of traffic cones and almost hitting a surprised traffic warden who jumped out of the way with his mouth open in protest. Someone tried to stop us by waving their arms in the air, but the crowd moved aside when they saw a drum horse charging down the mall. Doyle ran across the median ahead, jumping the low stone wall like a man who had run out of options. He looked back at me for a second, just long enough to give me a sneer, and then he disappeared into the tour group, which was a mess of umbrellas and cameras. Juno sped up beneath me, and the sound of her hooves hitting the ground echoed between the buildings, each blow a challenge to the city itself. The sound of police sirens mixed with the sound of iron shoes hitting the ground, and the scared shouts of people who were watching. The city felt like a drumline, with a lot of rhythm and tension. The air was thick with sweat and adrenaline. I held on to my radio with my thumb on the button. "Suspect heading for Admiralty Arch. Repeat. Doyle's heading for Admiralty Arch." A wave of bodies slowed us down, a climate protest that had spilled over the intersection, with colorful banners waving and voices raised in chant. Doyle dove into the crowd, pushing past protesters and disappearing under a sea of bodies and signs. I swore and stopped Juno in her tracks. The horse reared up, its nostrils flaring, and I leaned in and said, "Easy, girl, wait for the gap." Someone yelled, "Oi," angrily. "Be careful!" As we moved through, faces blurred past. My helmet caught the sun and sent a flash through the mess. The crowd suddenly split apart when a police officer yelled, "Mounted guard, coming through!" And Juno broke free, her strong steps taking us to the archway, just as Doyle climbed over a line of barricades and into the shadow of a construction site. He was almost gone. All I could see was a flash of orange behind a pile of steel drums. I squeezed my knees, Juno lunged, and we jumped the curb, making a lot of noise as we went over the loose gravel. My heart raced, and the noise of the city faded to a dull throb. The chase had taken away everything but muscle and instinct. The delivery truck skidded into the intersection and almost hit us both. I pulled on the reins, and Juno moved to the side with the grace of a dancer, making sparks fly from the stone with her hooves. The driver's face turned white. He cursed under his breath, then revved the engine and sped away, leaving us in a cloud of smoke. My radio made noise again. "Fraser, do you have eyes?" "Yes." Doyle just walked onto the construction site by Westminster Bridge. I could hardly breathe. My chest was tight and the sweat was stinging my eyes. Juno's breath was heavy and hot, and her sides shook with effort. But she didn't give up. We slid around a pile of concrete and almost lost our balance on the loose grit. But then we got back into our rhythm and kept going. The sharp sound of a snare drum from a rehearsal nearby floated in, bouncing off the river and echoing through the steel skeleton of the half-built site. I saw Doyle climb up a scaffold and blend in with a group of workers in the middle of the chaos. He took off his orange vest and threw it away. then tried to blend in with the people wearing hard hats and high-visibility jackets. But Juno's eyes were better than mine. She saw him right away, ears up, snorting, and the muscles in her neck tensed up with excitement. I called it in, my voice hoarse. "Targets in disguise, hard hat and blue jeans, still in sight." Police on foot were coming from the south, their radios blaring. I took out my gun and pointed it low, knowing that one wrong move could make this a disaster for everyone in range. Doyle ran away again, jumping off the scaffold and running across an open yard to the river. I pushed Juno to run faster, chasing him through puddles and piles of sand. My whole world became the man who was running away and the wild rhythm of the chase. He jumped over a fence, almost falling. Juno cleared it behind him, and her weight almost knocked it over. I yelled, "Stop! Cops! Don't move!" He ducked behind a shipping container covered in graffiti and didn't pay attention to me. I got off in one smooth motion, landing hard with my gun drawn and my boots slipping on the wet pavement. Juno circled, ready, with her nostrils wide open, as if she knew a fight was coming. As I turned the corner, Doyle turned around and brandished a long steel pipe, grinning with his teeth bared. "Get away," he growled. "You're not gonna get me." I kept my voice steady and my gun steady. "Let it go, Doyle. It's done. You've got yourself in a box." He swung wildly, and I ducked, the pipe whistling past my head. Juno let out a loud whinny and stomped her hoof to warn Doyle, who hesitated for a moment because the horse was so big. The sound of police footsteps behind me was deafening, and the echo of their authority blocked off all exits. The drums in the distance, the roar of the river, and the hoofbeats on concrete all came together to make a tense and fateful symphony. Doyle's eyes darted around, looking for one last way out. But the city, its people, its horses, and its heartbeat, closed in on him, changed to the stable hand, a breath between storms. I heard the chaos on the radio, and the barracks went quiet as everyone waited to see what would happen. Even though horses are patient animals, they knew something was going to happen that would change everything, one way or another. "Back to Fraser." I stepped forward, my voice steady, with Juno behind me. The city held its breath for what would happen next. The construction yard fell silent, as thick and heavy as the fog coming in off the Thames. The parade drums started up again somewhere beyond the fence. The sound was slow and echoed, bouncing off the steel and stone of the bridgeworks. I could hear my own heartbeat, Juno's slow breathing behind me, and the distant, breathless shouts of the city behind us. Doyle was only a dozen feet away, his hands slick on the long steel pipe and his chest heaving. In the dim light, he looked older, more like a ghost than a villain. His skin was pale, and his eyes were wild with something more than anger, maybe desperation. He looked from the shine of my gun to Juno's flared nostrils and then back to the river, as if he were trying to figure out how much a fall from this height would cost. He spit on the ground. "You think I care about your rules? What about your medals? I know what the crown is really worth, Sergeant. It's just a lot of noise and ceremony." My voice was calm and flat. "Put down the pipe. Mason, you're surrounded by armed police and cavalry and there's nowhere to run. Don't make it worse for yourself." He stopped for a second, and in that time the sounds of the city came in. The drums from the parade thundering over the bridge, the roar of buses, and the snap of wind banners. Juno stomped, and the iron in her hoof rang like a bell. I could feel her presence keeping me grounded, just like she always did when things threatened to get out of hand. The scaffolding above shook as a flock of pigeons took off. Doyle twitched, then swung the pipe wildly and desperately, hitting a pile of traffic cones and sending them skittering across the tarmac. Juno was the first to react. She snorted, stomped her foot, and turned her body so that her huge shoulder shielded me from the worst of the arc. I stepped to the side and lowered my aim. My arms were tense and coiled tight. Doyle was now screaming, his voice rising above the drumbeats. "You're all just puppets, marching for no reason and putting your lives on the line for a parade. I used to be one of you. Do you think they cared when I came back broken?" I blinked. His words cut through the moment and showed something raw beneath the bravado. I knew deep down. For a moment, the chaos mixed with memories. Men lost in shadows, and the weight of duty felt like invisible chains. But there was no time for sympathy now that blood had been shed and danger was still so close. "Mason, it doesn't have to end like this. I understand that you're scared. But take a look around. You hurt people today, even a horse that never did anything wrong to you. Is that really who you are?" He shook his head, shaking, and the pipe in his hand shook. Don't act like you know me." He jumped. The world sped up. Juno stood up, blocking Doyle's way with a wall of muscle and will. At the same time, I lunged forward and grabbed Doyle's arm, twisting the pipe away as Juno slammed her hooves into the ground with such force that the whole container shook. Doyle fought like a man who had nothing to lose. He hit my ribs with an elbow, trying to get away, but years of practice and street fights had made my reflexes second nature. I pushed him down, knee in his back, and fought for control. The steel pipe fell to the ground and landed at Juno's feet. She snorted and kicked it into a pile of rubble with a quick toss of her head. "You're under arrest for assault, endangerment, and public disorder," I said in a rough voice that sounded rough to me. "Do not move." He turned around, face against the cold concrete, but he kept fighting. "You're just a tool, no better than the horse." But then I saw something else in his eyes. Tiredness. And maybe, just maybe, a hint of regret. The parade drums behind us got louder, and the sound echoed through the bridge's skeleton, making the moment feel both endless and urgent. The police rushed in, ready with handcuffs and out of breath. One officer took charge, holding Doyle's arms and putting the cuffs on. He screamed as they pulled him up, and the sound was sharp and broken. "The Royals don't care. You are all just toys for their games." I stepped back, my chest pounding and my hands shaking from the adrenaline. Juno put her head down next to mine and sniffed softly, as if to see if I was still alive. I stroked her neck and let my hand rest on her bridle, feeling how solidly she was there. One of the police officers slapped my shoulder. "Are you okay, Sergeant?" I nodded. "Yeah, thanks to her." I smiled and looked into Juno's deep, brown, steady eyes. "We work well together." We stood there for a long time. Juno, me, the police, and the broken pieces of Doyle's anger, all surrounded by the sound of drums and the busy life of the city. Change to the stable hand, quiet thought. Before I saw them come back, I heard about the standoff on the radio. You never get used to the danger or the sudden silence after a day of thunder. But I know what bravery looks like better than most people. It's not in the awards or the ceremony. It's in times like this that people and horses stand up to the worst the world can throw at them and don't back down. Back to Fraser, taking deep breaths. I saw the police take Doyle away, and I could hear his curses fading into the city's heartbeat. The sky had turned gray again, and it looked like it might rain, but I didn't care. Juno rubbed her nose against my sleeve, and I said, "Good girl, it's over." But I knew that some storms never really go away, as the drums echoed across the Thames. You just learn to get through them, one step at a time with each other. For a moment, the world was just breathing, Juno's and mine, each breath and exhale weaving together like notes in a soft song. The noise of boots and shouts faded into the background as the police surrounded Doyle. He was finally out of breath, and his shoulders sagged under the weight of the steel handcuffs. Applause broke out behind us, first slowly and then quickly, as city workers, medics, and bystanders realized it was over. The sound was rough and tired, but it was real, a raw thankfulness that filled the air all night. The construction workers, who were still covered in cement and dust, had time to clap, and their faces showed how relieved they were. Juno stood next to me, her sides shaking but her eyes calm. She watched the scene with a kind of quiet satisfaction, as if she knew exactly what role she had played, and wasn't one to brag. I put my hand on her neck and ran my fingers through her wet hair, feeling the steady pulse under her skin. A young medic with red cheeks and wide eyes ran over with a first aid kit. "Are you okay, Sergeant? You're bleeding." I looked down. Doyle's wild swing had hit me with the edge of his pipe, and a thin line of blood curled around my wrist. It didn't really hurt, not compared to the wild, hollow ache in my chest and the tiredness that seemed to be coming from all sides. "I'll live," I said, my voice hoarse. "Check the others first. The horse that fell in the mall, my team, and anyone else who got caught in the stampede." He nodded and ran away. I looked back at the scene. Police officers talking quietly, collecting evidence, and putting Doyle in the back of a squad car. His face was a mask of anger and resignation, and when the door closed, I saw one last glare, something unfinished in his eyes. I let it go. For some men, some wounds never heal, but for now, this was where the real work was. I took the heavy harness off Juno's back right there on the street, so her skin could breathe. She shook herself, and her mane fell down, as if to get rid of the dust and stress of the chase. For a moment, she almost looked like she was having fun, a horse that wanted to be petted and run free down the city's wide streets. The applause stopped, and the sound of boots slowly clattering as my fellow guards got back together took its place. Some of them still looked pale and scared from the violence and chaos, but most of them managed a tired smile or a pat on the back. Medics took care of Samson, the bay who had been hurt by Doyle's trap. His wound was now bandaged, and he stood with his head down and his flank pressed against his rider's side. A light rain started to fall, washing away the blood and sweat on the street. Everyone in the city took a long, deep breath. The feeling of being hunted and in danger went away. Now all we felt was relief and pride in what we had been through and overcome. Change to the stable hand, which is steady, gentle, and grounding. After the crisis is over, I always listen for the sound of horses returning to the barracks. It's the steady, even stomp of their feet, the jangling of their tack, and the low, happy snort they make when they realize they're home. I saw them come in one by one, with their riders slumped but not giving up. Samson was hurt, but he was standing up straight. The medic said that a tendon was bruised but not broken. Juno was the last to come in. She held her head high, had muddy feathers, and a new scrape on her shoulder, but she didn't seem to be in pain. I walked up with my hands open so she could smell them before I reached for her halter. "Good girl," I said in a voice that was soft enough to calm a storm. She blinked, her eyelids heavy, and then she put her chin on my arm. Back to Fraser. I stayed in the stall next to Juno after the questions were answered. The reports were written. and the last of the curious crowds had left. The only light came from the golden spill from the stable window. The only music was the distant roll of thunder and the fading beat of a parade drum, which was slower now, almost like a lullaby. I slowly and carefully brushed her coat, getting the knots out of her mane and the bits of city out of her tail. She leaned into the brush and took deep breaths, each one a little softer than the last. We were both coming down, letting the adrenaline wear off and the fear and violence dull as we got comfortable with things we knew. I said, "You saved lives today," not caring who heard. "You saved me." Juno moved one ear as if to say, "Of course. That's what partners do." Outside, boots stomped through puddles, police radios crackled, and the city went back to its normal activities. I saw the blue lights fade away, and Doyle became just another shadow in a memory that would be told and retold for years to come. Some of the city workers walked by the stable and nodded, and one of them shyly waved. "Never seen anything like that. Sergeant. She's amazing." I smiled, and my chest swelled with pride. She is. As the night went on, I thought about what was coming next. The ceremony the next day, the never-ending cycle of drills, and the constant watchfulness that never really went away. I knew that the city would always bring up new storms, new threats, and new men like Doyle. But I also knew that we would meet them the same way, as a team built on trust, standing next to Juno. Change to the stable hand for one last thought. People always want to know if horses know when they've done something brave. I tell them, watch Juno tonight. She'll sleep well and not have any bad dreams. She did her job and then some. That's all we can ask for. Back to Fraser, the city breathing out. The drums stopped, the rain cleaned the city, and Juno and I finally felt better. Mission accomplished. After the chaos, there is a calm. Not an empty kind, but a full one, as if the city is holding its breath to see what we will do with everything that just happened. As I walked down the line of stalls the next morning, I heard the sound of Juno's hooves on the straw and the city waking up in the distance. It was quiet, but there was life, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. Some people think that being a lifeguard is all about the shine, like the parades, the cheers, and the pictures with tourists. But if you asked me, the real work starts when the music stops and everyone goes home. It's in the moments after that you feel the pain in your muscles, remember the danger, and learn the lesson. I stood next to Juno and ran my hand along her neck, feeling the shape of her muscles and bones. She leaned against me, her breath warm and her body steady, as if to remind me that we were both still here. I heard a reporter's voice in my head asking, "What were you thinking, Sergeant, as you chased Doyle through the middle of the city?" I never got the answer right. What goes through your mind when you run toward trouble instead of away from it? You think about your team and how to keep the public safe. You think about the old woman in the crowd, the little girl by the rail, Samson's injury, and how one mistake could ruin everything. But most of all, you trust your horse and the training you gave it. That day, Juno was more than just an animal. She was my partner, my shield, and my rock in the storm. I could see her eyes, which were steady and focused. She never flinched, even when firecrackers went off at her feet or Doyle's shadow crossed the parade. At that moment, she taught me something about bravery. Not the loud kind, or the kind that marches in a parade, but the kind that stands its ground and waits for fear to pass. I thought about how the world sees us as soldiers on horseback, standing still and stoic, like statues come to life. They don't see the hard work, the sweat, and the time spent in the dark and cold. They don't know how hard it is to stay calm when your body is telling you to run. That's the real job. That's what counts. Change to the stable hand, voice soft and quietly proud. There is a rhythm to this life, like the sergeant says, that is based on trust. You have the discipline of the regiment, the bond between the riders, and the faith of the people who come from all over the world to stand behind the barricades and wave their flags. In the quiet, I sometimes think that knowing you're part of something bigger, something that has been around for hundreds of years, is what keeps us strong. It is not about breaking their will when you train a drum horse. It's about getting inside their heads and helping them see danger as a sign, not a punishment. You show them how to avoid sharp things, stay calm during explosions, and not see a drum as a threat, but as a call to attention. The science is easy. Reward calmness, and keep doing it until it becomes second nature. Patience is the key to art. The riders aren't that different either. You are in charge, but you also listen. You are in charge, but sometimes the horse teaches you how to breathe, slow down, and see the way forward through the panic. Back to Fraser, thinking about things and looking for meaning. I sat in the empty barracks with my boots off and my uniform jacket unbuttoned, watching the rain drip down the window. I thought about the men and women I had served with over the years. Some were dead, and some had wounds that no doctor could see. I wondered if Doyle would have found his way back in another life, or if the city had just been too much for him. It's easy to judge from the outside, but standing there hurt and alive, I realized how close we all are to the edge at times. There isn't much of a line between duty and need. Maybe the lesson is that no one does it alone. A memory came to mind. Juno's first training run, when she was scared of the sound of a snare drum and almost threw her rider. The handler, who was an old cavalryman, didn't yell at or punish. He just stood there with his hand on her neck until her breathing slowed. I thought that was leadership, not yelling, not asking for much. Simply standing your ground and waiting for trust to catch up. I thought about how the city never stays the same and how every parade is a practice for the next challenge. The threats aren't always clear. Sometimes they're a wrench in your pocket, a spike in the road, or a man who feels invisible until he blows up. We need to be ready for anything, to be where the danger is and have faith in the people and animals around us. Change to the stable hand, adding layers of insight. In this job, we talk about legacy a lot. Soldiers come and go, but the lessons stay. The calmness of Juno and the strength of men like Fraser will teach the foals that are born next spring. The new recruits will hear the story of the time a drum horse faced noise and fire and still got her rider home. Tradition grows not in books, but in the sound of hooves and breath, and the way one life affects another. Back to Fraser, ending with determination. I know Juno and I will walk the mall again before the next parade and before the next sunrise. We'll stop where Samson fell, where Doyle disappeared, and where the city watched and waited. Someone might know us. Not sure. But I will know. And she will know. The city will be a little safer because a horse and a soldier learned to trust each other and faced the storm together. That's the work. That's what you learn. And I still hear it in the sound of Juno's hooves, not the iron gates, the shining boots, or even the centuries-old stone underfoot, but the thread that runs between a soldier and his horse is what keeps Whitehall safe. Trust, like spring grass, is pure and hard to break. You can't see that trust, but I promise you that if you listen closely, you'll hear it. Sometimes like a horse steadies her breath when the ground shakes, sometimes like a man who plants his boots and won't back down. I stood by the rail, and the city slowed down behind me. Juno's big head was on my shoulder. We both stayed still for a long time. As night fell, the last bits of parade banners fluttered in the wind. The rain still whispered through the gutters, and Whitehall became quiet. I let myself think about how things might have turned out differently for a minute. If I hadn't put my faith in Juno, if she didn't believe me, would there have been another headline, another crack in how safe the city felt? I pushed the idea out of my mind. Living in what-ifs is pointless. But that question, the one I would still be asking long after the drums stopped, remained. Would London be the same if there hadn't been that thread of trust? People around the world want to think that tradition is just a relic. They don't see the drills at dawn, the sweat in the stable, or the shivers that come before the first note of the march. But tradition isn't just a memory. It's something that people and animals shape and grow every day. Every parade and ceremony shows that some things never get old. Even in the 21st century, they get better as they face new threats, new technology, and new people. I scratched Juno's favorite spot behind her ear while she stomped her feet, and her feathers shone even in the dark. I whispered softly and steadily, "You did well. You always do." Changed to the stable hand, soft and steady. I wish people knew what it really takes to keep a city calm when storms come. It's not just training. It's not just bravery. It's the little things that matter. A brushstroke on a muddy flank, the warmth of a hand, and the slow, patient building of trust that lasts even when the world snaps and bites. There are a lot of stories in the city, and most of them will never make the news. That's fine. They live on in how Juno acts, the pride in Fraser's eyes, and the way we carefully close the barracks gates every night. I sometimes walk the rows late at night and listen to the horses breathe. Each one is a guardian and a part of a story that started long before any of us were born. The new recruits will come, nervous and excited, and they will learn what I have learned. A drum horse is more than just a horse. It is a partner. That every stable hand and lifeguard is part of something bigger. Back to Fraser, voice calm, a lesson and an invitation. If you ever go to Whitehall and see the shine of armor or the steady gaze of a drum horse holding her line, remember this. Behind the show are memories, sweat, hope, history, muscle, and trust. If you can see your own reflection in the polished harness, stay away from her for both of your safety. But wait a second. Look at how the horses move. The soldiers breathe with them, not against them. That's the real deal. And if this story touches you, do something with it when you get home. Let your friends know. Tell others what you learned. Behind every photo and parade, there is love, sacrifice, and a refusal to let the past go. Tell people to keep their distance and be nice to the horses. Let them have the room they need to work, protect, and serve. As Juno's hooves echoed down the stone street tonight, fading from the noise of the city to the quiet of the barracks, I felt the pride that comes from knowing you did right by those who trust you, whether they are animals or people. The rain got lighter. The last drum beats faded away in the square, soft as a memory. Juno turned her head and looked me in the eye. For a moment, I felt everything, the past, the danger, the quiet bravery of doing your job and coming home together. For those who listen all the way to the end, here's one last thing. Tradition isn't a prison. It's a way to stay alive. It lets us face each day, no matter how dangerous, with our eyes wide open and our hands steady. This is what makes a city trust its guards, and its guards trust their horses. The next time you walk by the horse guards gate, think about the story of Juno and the guards. Know that there are scars, sweat, and strong hearts behind the ceremony. As long as the thread of trust holds, this city, our city, will stay strong. Change to the stable hand, closing the circle. Another night is here. The horses and the city both fall asleep. Stories that started long before us and will go on long after us keep them together. The last sound is the soft clip-clop of hooves and the slow roll of a drum. It fades away, getting softer and softer, until all you hear is the peace we fought so hard to win. Back to Fraser, last words. And so the day ends, not with a bang, but with a promise. A promise to stand by, protect, and trust. To keep going. If you found something here like courage, hope, or respect, don't let it go. Take it with you. And the next time you see a drum horse in a parade, give it a nod for Juno. That's how stories stay alive. You can hear the sound of Juno's hooves in the distance. The drums slow down to a steady beat and then stop. Whitehall is asleep, but the watch is still going.